What began as harmless fun turned into unthinkable tragedy, where laughter became screams and innocent jokes turned deadly. These are the true stories of pranks gone catastrophically wrong, where a single moment of poor judgment created horrors that would haunt families forever. Sometimes, the line between humor and tragedy is thinner than you think. It was October 31st, 2016, in suburban Ohio, as Halloween festivities filled the neighborhood. Traffic moved steadily along a busy 4-lane road during the evening rush. Earlier, rain had left the pavement slick, and sparse streetlights cast long shadows across the darkened roadway. 19-year-old Rylan Coe had just finished his shift stocking shelves at a local grocery store. Known among his friends for his outgoing personality and willingness to take on any dare, Rylan rarely backed down from a challenge. His impulsive nature often led him into situations that others might avoid, but it was also what made him the life of any gathering. Tonight, he had plans to meet friends at a rental house situated roughly 35 feet back from the busy road. The single-story house had become a popular spot for their group's Halloween celebration. 3 of Rylan's friends had spent the afternoon preparing an elaborate prank, gathering masks and costumes with the intention of recording a scare video. They had positioned themselves strategically around the property, waiting for the perfect moment to spring their surprise. The plan was simple, but relied on the element of sudden pursuit rather than any form of containment or safety measures. As traffic continued its steady flow along the road, with vehicles traveling at speeds approaching 50 miles per hour in the 45-mile-per-hour zone, Rylan stepped outside the rental house. The damp conditions from the earlier rainfall had made the grass treacherous, though this detail went unnoticed in the excitement of the moment. The friends had tested their hiding spots multiple times, ensuring they could emerge quickly from behind parked cars and landscaping features. Without warning, his 3 masked friends rushed toward him from different directions, shouting and creating the intended startling effect. Rylan's immediate reaction was exactly what they had hoped for. He turned sharply and began running toward what he perceived as the safest escape route, the sidewalk area near the road. His foot caught the wet grass at the worst possible moment. The slippery surface provided no traction, and his forward momentum carried him beyond the sidewalk and directly into the path of oncoming traffic. A sedan traveling in the right lane struck him at full speed, the impact throwing his body onto the asphalt with devastating force. The collision caused fatal blunt force injuries to both his head and chest. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but Rylan was pronounced dead at the scene. The driver of the sedan was subsequently arrested and later charged with aggravated vehicular homicide due to impairment, adding another layer of tragedy to the incident. Investigators quickly determined that the Halloween prank had directly triggered Rylan's movement into the roadway. The 3 friends who had orchestrated the scare were cited for reckless conduct in connection with the incident. Phone footage recovered from the scene confirmed the sequence of events, showing how a harmless prank had escalated into a fatal encounter with traffic. The case proceeded through local criminal courts, where the combination of impaired driving and reckless pranking created a complex legal situation. Authorities concluded that while the prank itself was not intended to cause harm, the failure to consider the proximity to active traffic and the wet conditions had created a deadly scenario. The investigation closed after determining that Rylan's death resulted from the unfortunate convergence of multiple factors: the startling prank, the slippery conditions, and the presence of an impaired driver traveling above the speed limit. The rental property was later subject to additional safety reviews by local authorities. Witness statements from neighbors confirmed the timeline of events. While Rylan's friends grappled with the unintended consequences of their Halloween surprise, 16-year-old Della Clunt, unaware that a seemingly innocent object would soon change everything. It was July 3rd, 2017, in a rural Missouri backyard as neighbors gathered for early Independence Day celebrations. The evening was warm and still under clear skies. A spacious yard stretched 50 feet to a wooden fence, while barbecue smoke drifted through the air and distant fireworks echoed nearby. 16-year-old Della Clunt had arrived at the gathering after finishing her summer job at a local retail store. Known for her quiet demeanor and compliant nature, Della often found herself going along with whatever activities her peers suggested. She rarely spoke up in group settings and had developed a reputation among her friends as someone who wouldn't cause trouble or resist their ideas. This evening, she was looking forward to a relaxed celebration before the main holiday events. Several older teenagers had brought an assortment of consumer fireworks to the gathering, planning to test a few items before the next day's larger display. The group had spread out across the yard, with some examining the various devices while others prepared food and drinks. Adult supervision was notably absent from the immediate area where the fireworks were being handled. One of the older teens had spent time earlier that day modifying a small consumer firework, carefully inserting it into a section of rigid PVC pipe and sealing the ends with layers of tape to resemble a harmless plastic dart. The disguised device looked convincingly innocent, with its explosive components completely hidden beneath the decorative materials. The rigid pipe casing transformed the firework into a confined explosive, concentrating the blast force in a single direction. The teen had practiced the presentation to make it seem authentic. When Della was called over to participate in what was described as a simple game, she approached without hesitation. The older teen explained that she needed to press the dart-like object against the wooden fence, assuring her that it was completely safe and inert. The device felt light in her hands, and nothing about its appearance suggested any danger. Following the instructions she had been given, Della positioned herself near the fence and pressed the disguised firework against the wooden surface. A concealed ignition fuse ignited the confined firework charge as she pressed the device into place, causing it to detonate less than 12 inches from her torso. The PVC casing directed the explosion's full force outward in a concentrated blast, sending shrapnel and debris directly into her chest and neck area. The close proximity and confinement of the detonation meant that the explosive energy was focused on her upper body with devastating effect. Della collapsed immediately, the catastrophic injuries proving fatal within moments. Other teens in the yard rushed to her location, but the severity of the blast injuries made any rescue attempts futile. Emergency services were called, but responders confirmed that Della had died before they arrived at the scene. Fire officials and law enforcement who investigated the incident quickly identified the device as a modified consumer firework that had been deliberately disguised and confined within PVC pipe. The explosive components were consistent with legal fireworks available for purchase, but the pipe casing created what investigators classified as a destructive device. One of the older teens admitted during questioning that the prank had involved intentional deception about the device's true nature. Charges were filed for involuntary manslaughter, unlawful use of a destructive device, and reckless endangerment. Investigators confirmed the blast directly caused Della's death and that she had been deliberately misled. The case closed at the county level, with officials warning about modified fireworks. Evidence and witnesses verified the fatal sequence, but Della wasn't the only one whose trust in friends led to tragedy. Miles away at an Arizona apartment complex, a late-night swim was already drifting toward disaster. It was June 2015. And the Arizona evening heat was beginning to fade as residents of a mid-sized apartment complex sought relief from the day's scorching temperatures. The community pool area was illuminated by overhead lighting that cast rippling reflections across the water's surface. The rectangular pool measured approximately 25 feet in width and stretched 40 feet in length, with a maximum depth of 8 feet at the deep end. No lifeguard was on duty during evening hours, as was typical for residential facilities. The pool's drainage system predated modern safety requirements, relying on a single main drain rather than the dual drain configuration that would later become mandatory. 22-year-old Gentry Vess had just completed his shift working for a local delivery service, spending most of the day navigating the desert heat in an unair-conditioned vehicle. Known for his athletic build and competitive nature, Gentry was a confident swimmer who had grown up around pools and lakes. His friends often remarked on his willingness to take on physical challenges. Two of Gentry's friends had arrived at the pool area earlier that evening. The trio had developed a pattern of creating informal competitions during their pool visits, often involving breath-holding contests or diving challenges. Tonight, they had conceived what they believed would be an entertaining prank involving the pool's drainage system. Earlier that day, the two friends had noticed that the pool's main drain cover could be loosened with minimal effort. The circular metal grate, located near the deepest section, had apparently worked loose over time due to inadequate maintenance. They discovered it could be completely removed, exposing the powerful suction opening beneath. The plan involved filming Gentry's reaction to what they described as an underwater suction effect. They assured him the experience would be harmless and that they had tested the setup thoroughly. The prank relied entirely on their false claims about safety measures and their ability to quickly resolve any complications. When Gentry arrived, his friends explained the challenge and encouraged him to dive toward the pool floor near the drain area. They positioned themselves with a phone to record the event, maintaining their assurances that everything was completely safe. Gentry dove toward the bottom as instructed, swimming directly toward the area where the drain cover had been secretly removed. As his body approached the exposed opening, the powerful suction created by the pool's circulation system immediately drew him against the drain. The force was far stronger than anyone had anticipated. Gentry's torso sealed against the opening, creating a powerful vacuum seal that the pool's pump system maintained with relentless pressure. His friends quickly realized their assumptions about the suction strength had been catastrophically wrong. Attempts to pull Gentry away proved futile against the mechanical force of the circulation system. The suction held him firmly underwater, preventing him from reaching the surface for air. Within minutes, he lost consciousness due to oxygen deprivation while still trapped against the drain opening. Emergency responders arrived after being called by other residents who had heard the commotion, but Gentry was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner confirmed that drowning was the cause of death, with the victim having been unable to break free from the suction force. Investigators discovered that the drain cover had been deliberately removed, exposing the full power of the pool's circulation system. Phone footage recovered from the scene documented the prank's planning and execution, clearly showing the intentional nature of the drain tampering. Local authorities filed charges related to tampering with pool safety equipment and reckless endangerment. The investigation revealed that the friends had severely underestimated the dangers associated with exposed pool drains. The apartment complex immediately implemented additional safety protocols and inspection procedures for all pool equipment. The case was resolved through local court proceedings, with officials emphasizing the lethal dangers of interfering with pool drainage systems. We've got more disturbing prank tragedies coming up, so hit that subscribe button if you want to see how jokes meant to be funny can turn horrifyingly fatal in seconds. It was January 2018, and the Colorado winter had settled over the residential neighborhoods with its characteristic bite. Snow covered the ground in a thin layer, and temperatures hovered near 20 degrees Fahrenheit as evening approached. The detached garage of a modest rental home sat approximately 30 feet from the main house, its single-car structure measuring roughly 12 by 20 feet. The building had no windows and only one entrance, with an overhead door that could be operated manually. 34-year-old Hollis Brunt had spent the day working on automotive projects, a hobby that had consumed much of his free time since moving to Colorado. Known for his meticulous attention to detail and non-confrontational personality, Hollis rarely engaged in arguments or risky behavior. His friends appreciated his calm demeanor and his willingness to help with mechanical problems, though he typically avoided situations that might lead to conflict. A small group of friends had gathered at the rental property for what was intended to be a casual winter evening. The main house felt cramped with several people present, so the group had decided to move their gathering into the detached garage, where a space heater provided some relief from the cold. The garage contained basic automotive tools and equipment, along with a sedan that Hollis had been restoring over the past few months. One of the friends had conceived what he considered a harmless prank involving the vehicle in the garage. The plan was simple, but relied on creating a sense of panic or confusion among the group. The friend had noticed that the garage door could be easily lowered and that the space would become quite enclosed once sealed. No carbon monoxide detector had been installed in the structure. As the evening progressed and the group settled into the garage space, the friend implementing the prank made his move. He started the sedan's engine, while the others were distracted with conversation and activities. The sound of the engine running initially seemed normal, as Hollis often tested his restoration work during these gatherings. However, the friend then activated the garage door, lowering it completely to seal the space. The enclosed area, measuring approximately 240 square feet, began filling with exhaust fumes from the idling vehicle. The carbon monoxide produced by the engine had nowhere to escape and began accumulating rapidly in the confined space. Hollis remained seated near the vehicle, unaware of the developing danger. Carbon monoxide is odorless and colorless, making its presence undetectable without proper equipment. The gas rapidly accumulated in the enclosed garage, creating a lethal atmosphere that none of the occupants could identify through their senses. As the concentration of carbon monoxide increased, Hollis began experiencing the effects of oxygen deprivation. The gas binds to hemoglobin more readily than oxygen, preventing his blood from carrying adequate oxygen to vital organs. Within a relatively short period of continued exposure, he collapsed and lost consciousness. Other members of the group eventually realized something was wrong, but their own exposure to the toxic fumes had begun affecting their judgment and reaction times. By the time they managed to raise the garage door and shut off the vehicle, Hollis had already succumbed to carbon monoxide poisoning. Emergency responders arrived after being called by neighbors who had noticed the commotion, but Hollis was pronounced dead at the scene. Fire officials immediately identified the cause as carbon monoxide poisoning resulting from vehicle exhaust in an enclosed space. The investigation revealed that the garage door had been intentionally lowered while the vehicle was running, creating the deadly conditions. Witnesses confirmed that the engine had been started as part of a planned prank, though the friend responsible claimed he had not understood the potential consequences. Local authorities filed charges for reckless endangerment and negligent homicide. The case highlighted the extreme dangers of running vehicles in enclosed spaces and the rapid onset of carbon monoxide poisoning in such environments. Hollis Brunt's story was a sobering reminder of how invisible dangers can prove fatal in enclosed spaces. For Cade Sparks, it wasn't toxic fumes that posed the threat, but a false promise of safety that led him one step too far. It was August 2017. And the Nevada desert heat was beginning to subside as evening approached the outskirts of a mid-sized city. A pedestrian overpass stretched across a busy 4-lane highway, its concrete structure rising approximately 22 feet above the roadway below. The bridge measured roughly 40 feet in length and 12 feet in width, with metal railings on both sides standing 3.5 feet high. Minimal lighting illuminated the walkway, creating patches of shadow between the sparse streetlights. 27-year-old Cade Sparks had arranged to meet friends at the Overpass location for what was planned as a late-night filming session. Working as a freelance videographer, Cade had developed a reputation for his willingness to take on challenging projects and his tolerance for risk when capturing unique content. His thrill-seeking personality often led him to accept assignments or participate in activities that others might consider dangerous, but his confidence in his abilities had served him well in his professional work. The group had gathered on the pedestrian bridge with the intention of recording challenge content for social media platforms. The overpass provided an elevated location with dramatic views of the highway traffic below, making it an appealing backdrop for their planned video. However, the lighting conditions were far from ideal, with only scattered illumination from nearby streetlights and passing vehicle headlights. One of Cade's friends had devised what he claimed would be an impressive stunt involving a trust fall from the bridge railing. The friend assured Cade that safety equipment had been installed below the overpass, including protective netting and padding that would prevent any serious injury. These claims were presented with complete confidence, and the friend maintained that he had personally verified the safety measures earlier that day. The prank relied entirely on false information about non-existent safety equipment. No nets, padding, or other protective measures had been installed beneath the overpass. The concrete surface below remained as hard and unforgiving as any typical roadway infrastructure. But this reality was concealed from Cade through deliberate misinformation. As the group prepared to begin filming, Cade was positioned near the railing and instructed on how to perform the backward fall. The friend continued to provide reassurances about the safety equipment, maintaining the deception even as Cade prepared to step over the barrier. The camera was positioned to capture what was expected to be a dramatic but safe stunt. Following the instructions he had been given, Cade climbed onto the metal railing, leaned backward, and allowed himself to fall from the overpass. The 22-foot drop provided no opportunity for recovery or course correction once he had committed to the action. His body struck the concrete surface below with devastating impact. The fall resulted in severe spinal injuries and massive internal trauma from the collision with the unyielding pavement. The force of the impact was concentrated on his back and head, causing injuries that were immediately life-threatening. Emergency services were called by witnesses who had observed the fall from nearby locations. Paramedics arrived and transported Cade to a local hospital in critical condition, but the extent of his injuries proved insurmountable. He died from complications related to the traumatic injuries shortly after arrival at the medical facility. Investigators who responded to the scene quickly confirmed that no safety equipment existed beneath the overpass. The concrete surface showed clear evidence of the impact, and no nets, padding, or other protective measures were found in the area. Recovery of video footage from the scene revealed the planning and execution of the prank. Authorities charged the friend with criminal negligence and reckless endangerment, determining that his deliberate false assurances about safety equipment constituted fraud that directly caused Cade's death. Additional trespassing charges followed because the overpass was not designated for recreation. In county court, officials stressed the consequences of providing false safety information. Investigators confirmed no nets or padding existed and recovered video and witness statements that documented the planning, deception, and fall. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.